Witam Państwa bardzo serdecznie na 61. Krakowskim Festiwalu Filmowym. Nazywam się Kaja Klimek i poprowadzę spotkanie z naszym gościem sekcji Fokus na Norwegię, w której pokazywane są najnowsze norweskie dokumenty, które sprowadziliśmy specjalnie dla Was. Bardzo się z tego faktu cieszę. A moim gościem będzie Egil Hosholt Larsen, reżyser filmu Tam, gdzie wraca człowiek. Ale oczywiście spotkanie będzie w języku angielskim, bo myślę, że teraz Egil zrozumiał tylko ze 3 rzeczy z tego, co powiedziałam. Zobaczymy co, ale przedstawiam się zatem na język angielski. Okay, so now I'm going to say the same thing in English. Welcome at the 61st Krakow Film Festival. My name is Kaja Klimek and I'm going to do the Q&A session. I'm the Q part, but the A part is Egil Hosholt Larsen, the director of Where Men Returns. And the film is part of our Focus on Norway section, where we show newest and the best documentaries from Northern Scandinavia. Let's call it that way. Welcome. It's really nice to have you with us at the festival. I'm sorry that we cannot meet in person, but it's still going to be interesting to talk to you about your film.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure. I really love everything basically that has to do with Polish film history and everything. So I'm very intrigued. I was actually supposed to be schooling in Poland, but it never turned out, unfortunately. So my bad. I think I missed something, but I'm very happy that you have included my film. And I'm also very happy to see so many other films that I also both participated in and know very well. So it's a beautiful program that you have. So it's a privilege. Thank you.
Yeah, we're going to tell that to the directors of the festival. They're going to be really happy to hear that. But tell me, because you said that you like Polish documentary cinema. What's the story with that? I'm interested in that. So before we start talking about your film, I wanted to ask on that.
No, basically, I think it has to do with my. First of all, I was educated as a still photographer, and secondly, I kind of came out as a let's say a bit of a cinephile, but also someone who was very obsessed about cinematography and maybe not normal for all, let's say, filmmakers working with documentary. So I come from that branch of people very interested in cinematography, and I mean, Poland has so many great cinematographers and schools for cinematography. So I guess it's a country to look for if you're interested in the aesthetics and the beauty of cinema. So basically that's it, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you. On behalf of Polish nation and Polish cinematographers, thank you very much. But you said about cinephilia, and that's interesting because I wanted to start our conversation about your film with actually me as a viewer, because sometimes, as you said before, you hadn't had a chance to talk about your film for a longer time. So maybe to fresh you up, how the viewing process went on my side. I was watching and I'm like, oh, that looks a bit like Lighthouse by Robert Eggers. And I'm like, this is interesting. And then the second thing is like, but it's like, there should be like Roald Amundsen just like coming somewhere, you know, because it looks like from the past. So I'm like, that's interesting also. And then I'm like, but this is actually a bit like Martian by Ridley Scott also, because there's like nothing basically and you are out there. And the last one, cinephilic thought was, yeah, but the story is a bit like Into the Wild, but a bit later with the story about the person that's the cat, I'm sorry, that we are watching. So the cinephilia aspect and watching a lot of films worked with me and with your film. So I wanted to ask you what you think about this kind of concept that your film made in my mind as a viewer.
I guess, first of all, it's a great privilege to be, even to bring those people up into your brain as watching the film is a great privilege. But I guess, yeah, I wouldn't say there are too many references in the film, like specific, but of course maybe I actually grew up very close to the Russian border. So I was fairly influenced by, let's say, Russian culture and literature and also filmmaking. Mm-hmm. So when I was studying, some of my sort of, let's call them heroes or people that I was influenced by was people like Alexander Sakurov, and also even Viktor Kossakovsky, who some of his films that I watched was very different, let's say, in the documentary genre, that they had such an uncompromising visual sort of fundament to everything that you could experience. And I think that the experience to be placed as a viewer into a space where you can experience time just fluently and just keep on understanding more and more about the environment, or the, let's say, the people that you meet, or the space that you have been sort of, you can imagine yourself just dropped by the helicopter in the middle of this place. And and I think that was the sort of starting point for this film as well, to sort of try to create that experience for the viewer.
Yeah,
a little bit like Lost in the Wild, or Lost in the Wilderness type of stories, I guess.
Yeah, it is a bit like that when you watch the film and you kind of land there and you discover what the story is going to be about. So what I would recommend to many people, maybe it's too late because they're going to now listen to us after they watch the film. It's so nice to not know too much about what you're actually going to experience, just to have it raw. I mean, like, you just explore with the film the situation that you were in. But I wanted to ask about you talked about the space, but you also talked about meeting people. And as far as I know, this is like really up north, and there's not too many people out there. And still you had the chance to meet a person who lives there. And I was like, so I wonder, what's the story behind their meeting? Because did you happen to go there and suddenly you meet him out there, or you heard about him, or what's the story behind it? Because there are so many entrance points that I can imagine being a viewer of your film, but probably the story is even different than those.
Yeah, basically he was one of the people that was an influence in my childhood, in the sense that I actually grew up in a village close to where he also spent some time. So I knew him from quite a few years back. I guess I knew, or parts of me grew up in that landscape, and also living with that proximity to nature. And but then I moved away when I started to become a grown-up person, and I didn't go back for many years. And when I started this film, I guess parts of me had lost connection to being that type of person who knew nature from the heart. I mean, I spent so much time as a child in nature, but spending maybe 15, 20 years away from that nature, or even to have the proximity to nature, whatever nature, it could be anywhere. But in this sense, it was in that wilderness that you just saw. I guess a part of me also lost the understanding, and also the way of, interacting with that nature, and understanding the sort of dynamic between the animals, and the tradition of hunting, and the tradition of poaching, and all of that stuff. And I guess after living away for so many years, I also have a different approach to it. So it was a bit of ambivalence towards the brutality of killing animals, of even the sort of logic of capturing animals in nature seemed a little bit distant to me. And I have to tell you that actually right now I am close to that place where we filmed the film, because I'm visiting my parents who still live here. So I can even show the viewers what it looks like. This is not exactly that place, but it's close by. So there's still snow.
Yeah.
Snow here.
Wow.
Basically, it was a childhood story that I lost, and the film, I guess, in a way, was a way for me to kind of a little bit connect back to some of those elements and live it through this guy. But I can never be that type of person again. It's sort of lost in my childhood, I guess.
But this is so interesting, because I was also thinking about the title of your film, and actually I know now who's the man who returns. it's not him, it's you, basically. That's
Yeah,
how.
in a sense, yeah.
In a sense,
It's
yeah.
true. Yeah.
Thank you for showing us the landscape. It's this is the best part of having those Zoom conversations with directors that are not basically at the festival and talking about, you know, I live there, and we are like, oh, and now suddenly you are like, yeah, I'm here. You know, this is gold. I really appreciate that on the behalf of everybody in here. So tell us a bit about Steiner as a person, because. He seems like he's not too talkative person, so probably it's being around him is more like doing than talking. But did it? And you said that you met him many years before, so it's really interesting story. But was it difficult for you to convince him to let you in the way?
Yeah, in one way, yes, because he is a very stubborn. Or actually, I have to say that he was a very stubborn person, because he actually died almost last summer, so almost 1 year ago.
Oh my God! So
So
sorry.
it was a very tragic incident where he had a heart surgery and then didn't listen to anyone's advice and went into nature by himself, and suddenly his heart stopped. So it was a bit of a tragic incident, also related to his stubbornness, I guess, and not really wanting to listen to anyone else, living his own way, in his own way. So, but in any sense, I guess his life ended sort of where he belongs, in a sense. So in that sense, it was.
You are the person who should say that. I'm like I never, I would never dare to say it, but it seems like this is the way to go for him. I'm so sorry to hear that. Yeah. So all those.
It was a very tragic thing, actually, and I was abroad at the time when I heard it, so I couldn't even make it to his funeral because it was so far away. So. It was a bit of a, yeah, it wasn't nice. I guess this is one of the things that are beautiful about doing documentaries about people. All of the documentaries you make and all of the films that you have sort of ventured into someone's life is that you become very close. And even though I knew Steinar from beforehand, you know that all of the films that you have participated in and all of those characters that you spend so much time with, they become a sort of a part of your life. So
of course.
Yeah. But Steinar, yeah, I guess he was in a one way a lonely type of person, but in the other hand, he was a very talkative, actually, from time to time. So, but he is the type of sort of the classic doer, and he loves to just keep on inventing his daily routines as it goes. So yeah, it was a pleasure to spend time with him, and I learned a lot in that process.
But what about him and because you were filming yourself, as we know, you are also a cinematographer, so there wasn't like a big crew, I presume. But him around the camera, wasn't he like, oh, like what was his reaction? And did you really need to like work with him on that technical level? I mean, like, I'm gonna film you, what you're doing every day. Like, I'm gonna just be here around you all the time, just to show the way you do your things. Was that like accepted, or were there discussions, or like I'm just really curious about him as a, you know, as a character, also as a protagonist in your film?
Yeah, it's interesting because I get some of those questions also when we were answering, because I was the cinematographer for Gunda, who's also in this program, and we get the same sort of answers. How did you approach the pigs? How did they react to the camera? How did you get so close by? So it's sort of a relatable question, and I guess it's very similar in both senses, that you have to spend time with people. And basically, I spent so much time with him that in the end, basically the only thing that was annoying for him was when I didn't help him, you know, pulling the ropes. So I did a lot of that, actually. And it was sort of the deal was that if basically I lost so many good scenes because I needed to help him also. So it was a bit of a struggle in that sense.
Yeah,
No, but
you are working also, that I'm at work, you know, I'm working.
Yeah,
You know?
it
Yeah.
was that type of a relationship actually. So I needed to help him slaughter the fish and do the things, and even though I'm extremely shitty and I go so much, he complained so much about everything that I did because I couldn't handle the boat. I couldn't really make a fillet out of the fish. I did it in the wrong way, and even though I pretended that I at least once used to know how to do these types of things, I became that southern guy who lost connection to everything that has to do with my hometown or my home, basically. So yeah,
It's
very disappointing.
yeah, but what I was thinking about him, like looking at all those things that he was doing, he reminded me of my grandpa, who was a bit older than him actually. But these are the people from different generations that we are, because I'm also 84 as you are. I checked how old are you? Sorry for that. But I was like, do we come from the same generation of people who are more like throwing out stuff than repairing them? We are not from the generation of people who can do things with their hands. We are more like working with the equipment, like computers or cameras in your case, and like talking about stuff, not really being able to build anything. So like, do you think that like what do you think about this kind of inability that we gained while being so up to our times? Because looking at him just like really doing those things, like if I want to eat, I need to catch a fish because there's not going to be a dinner. This is kind of a thing that is really foreign for people like us, I guess. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I guess it goes a little bit into the main theme of the film as well. Let's say I guess everybody in a sense who spends time in their daily life doesn't really have any need to create a relationship to other elements than what the normal life would consist of in a city or even in a small town, or even people here who live the life in this really tiny town where there is not many people around, doesn't really have a connection to nature in the sense that people used to have just maybe 30 years ago or 40, 50 years ago. And I guess that has an impact on how we live and how we think and how we relate to everything around us. So I think those were the most interesting parts of the reason why I wanted to sort of keep on filming him, because I did I followed him for many years. And I think I also represent, definitely, maybe like you say yourself, also being that generation, we really lost touch of sort of understanding how the trees work and understanding how to cut the trunk of the tree, not in that direction, but in that direction, and how to handle the fish. And it doesn't have to be the animals even, it's just a normal sense of making a normal understanding of the environment that we live in. And of course, it would be different if you lived somewhere in Africa, or if you live in the Arctic, or if you live in the Sahara or whatever. Life is very different, but to have an understanding of the proximity or the sort of surroundings that you're part of, I think, at least for most people here in Scandinavia and probably many places in Europe and around the world, a lot of people don't have that. They don't have nature as part of their daily life, and of course something will get lost in that process. So and the next generation is facing another challenge, but we are seeing a lot of interesting, life is taking new directions all the time, so it will be interesting to see how it evolves. I have a kid myself who is 1.5 years old, and I'm very curious to see what relationship he has to everything around him in 15 years time. So yeah.
if there's gonna be this, if the connection is gonna be stronger or like even lesser than in our generation. That's interesting, because there is this kind of idea of, oh, we need to remind ourselves all the time that you know, there is a connection between cow and ham, or like a pig and a ham. It's the same
Yeah.
thing, but in different places, right? So so there's something to it, definitely. And you said that you followed him for many years. So were you filming him also for quite extent of time? What was the there?
I followed him for more than because I started this project in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
And then I filmed him for a few years, and then the project stopped, and I picked it up again a few years later. And so it was a sort of long process, and of course, not all of it is in the film. And I think the film also changed throughout the years as well. So it was it was a long process, both filming wise, but also editing and yeah, everything.
Yeah,
So
looking
it was a kind of
looking for the final cut.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing when you work on things for so many years, right?
It is a big challenge, and we had a great, a beautiful team of very few, a small team. Like I worked on my own when we were filming, but I had the greatest help from my let's say my best friend, my wife, and my producer, who is we are working very closely on all our projects, and we have a very sort of, let's say, we're coming from two different approaches maybe or experiences regarding filmmaking, and this is extremely important in the process of all the films that we're doing. And we had a beautiful editor from Denmark called Meek Stampe, who also was really the core of making this film happen. It's one of those films where you, as a director, are getting a bit lost. You have worked so many years with a project that could go in so many different directions because I had a lot of material compared to the other films that I have made. And so it was a different process, and also sort of a film that changed a lot for me when we started editing almost 7 years later after I started the process. So it's a weird process, to be honest.
Yeah, but it's so interesting to find, like, to try to find a fresh eye or fresh approach, and you know, look at the things from different perspective, because you are actually again the man who returns to this in a way.
To his film, yeah.
Yeah, but this is like the land that we are. I mean, like up there, up north. It's the land of radical decisions. That's what I think about this area. That you decide to live there. This is radical, right? And
that's an interesting approach. Yeah, I understand what you mean, I think.
Yeah, the world around you is radical. It's you know, there's snow and it's late May, and this is the way that you, like, in a way, choose to live. But I wanted to ask you about the radical decision that you make if it comes to the form of your film, because of course there's not too many colors out there for most of the time, and still you decide that the film is going to be in black and white. I like, in those many years of me working as a moderator, I discovered that a question why your film is in black and white, it's not a silly one, it's the interesting one, because there's always interesting answer to this. So here I am asking you why the film is in black and white, Egil.
It's a very interesting, and of course a huge, maybe a bigger question than it sounds like superficially.
Of course.
I guess this project started out, I was very inspired by a photographer who had been traveling in this region in the 50s, middle of the 50s and 60s, called Kori Kivijärvi, who is a sort of he's a fairly famous Norwegian photographer who is making very his photographs are very spiritual in a sense, and they are also very not typical for portraying this type of place. He was very obsessed about the structures of the scenes, like the structure of the landscape, And I guess from the beginning, this film was a black and white film for me, a little bit because of my sort of the inspiration or something, a way of looking at something that I knew by heart very well from a different sort of, from a different lens or from a different, what do you call it? Yeah, if you put black and white on it, suddenly you take away the filter and the things that you knew by heart. So it was a way of, for me personally, just looking at the world from a different perspective or from a different point of view.
I understand.
And then, of course, there are some you can talk about some more specific sort of impacts that black and whites have. And since I also am a still photographer or educated as a still photographer, you know that when you're out taking photographs as with your black and white film rolled into your camera, you know that you will look in a different way. You will look for different patterns. You will look differently at contrasts. Your eye is searching for something else. So this was also for me a very important decision very early on to sort of figure out how to compose the image. You weren't looking for the repetition of color or so just as a photographer, this was an interesting or an important decision to make. And I think maybe my producer and some of the people who maybe wanted to sell this film was not maybe as happy as I was taking such a decision, because I guess many people or even TV stations already, by knowing that it's black and white, will refuse it, which is a bit of a shame, I think, because for me, it's like choosing a lens or choosing a different camera or choosing a format, a CinemaScope or a 4x3 or black and white is also a kind of a format. It's like choosing red instead of green paint when you're doing so it's just a way of expressing the images. But it's, I guess, I think I find the landscape and the skin of the sort of aging skin on his face and the details of the forehead and his like crippled hands and everything becomes more prominent, let's say, when you remove the colors. And even the blood of the fish and the blood of the seal that he kills in the beginning, if you take that away, it becomes surfaces and sort of repetition of surfaces instead of something that you expect it to be. So sometimes maybe you put more into it as a viewer, into the black and white, because you kind of have to imagine the colors in a sense. So even though you know the sky, maybe it's not blue and everything is still very much black and white, you can imagine, but you can't know for sure. So it sort of leaves a bit of a space for you to imagine some part of that scene as well. So I don't know, you can go on for about black and white forever, but it's an interesting subject, which is also a subject for Gunda again. So many people are asking the same questions about the choice of black and white and blah, blah, blah. So this topic is, of course, it's always encouraging and interesting to discuss. And I guess there are no wrongs and rights about these things. It's basically just decisions by some artists who want to express something. And for sure, you have some ideas and thoughts about it, but I hope someone will disagree, let's say.
Yeah, I'm the one who agrees, because like all those textures that you said, they wouldn't work in that way. Every surface looks different thanks to the fact that everything is in the same kind of palette. So I'm a fan of black and white, because like there are so many reasons also when you watch it to just like be able to focus and allow yourself to feel a bit alienated at the same time, and then to compare it with, for example, because of course there's kind of a bit of animals in the film. So you are like, oh, and last week I watched Life in Color by David Attenborough, and I know that all those things are like colorful, right? And those colors have meaning, but at the same time, this is not the vision of David Attenborough with, you know, showing us the world that also disappears from the different perspective, right? So I really admire this kind of decisions. I'm not asking this question like, why in black and white? More like, I know that there's going to be something interesting going on in there. And you mentioned Gunda, and I need to ask about your approach as a cinematographer, also as a director, towards the world of the other. I mean, the animals. Because I mentioned David Attenborough, we know those stories of animals that have names and they have those, like, you know, the ideas, they are like heroes in a Disney film sometimes, and that's the part of documentaries that are about animals. But what do you think about how, as a human being, how to depict the world that we really kind of understand, but I don't know what the cat wants sometime, and we live together. So, you know, what's your approach to that matter? Because there's also really important animal character in your film. I mean, the dog.
Yeah, no, I guess in some way those two films are a little bit opposite in one sense, but in another maybe there could be some similarities in the sense that at least, or I mean, even for this film where there are some, he's showing us some of the brutality of human nature maybe, or at least about him. And maybe if you take that and you compare it to what some of these pigs are going through, or some of the livestock that are living all their life in barns, and we barely don't think about it at all. We just open the plastic container and we fry our meat and we go ahead and eat it. And if you try to compare the brutality, it's kind of obvious that, of course, Steinar, he shows us a bit of that, and it's just as brutal and it's just as merciless and all of these things. And I think the film sort of tries to show us a bit of his equilibrium, that he's trying in one way to care for some, and he's sort of trying to be, in a sense, God, in a way which maybe, for me at least, personally, from a person who comes from this place, I know that he has some good ideas about it, because, okay, let's say that because of pollution, a lot of or overfishing, too many fishes dies, and then it has an impact on the other animals, who has an impact on the other animals, and then again the human nature becomes the villain, and he's sort of trying to, in his own extreme way, trying to sort of balance this up by killing the predators. And then, of course, you can definitely disagree with him, because it seems at times to be a sort of sport, or to be at least a way of him, like a desperation almost, to sort of, in his own way and in his own terms, try to take action. And it doesn't make sense to me at all. And I think for me, I think still it's interesting to use him as an example to kind of understand the general brutality of the human mentality. Like, we have been, like, if you ask Victor about this, he can tell you all the numbers about how many chickens, how many cows, how many pigs are killed every single day. And the brutality of making that actually happen has such a scale that it's almost difficult to understand or to sort of perceive. So I think the mission for this film was to just bring us out into the banality of, or to the sort of superficial nature, just to understand that there is a nature and there is a human trying to relate to these things. And I don't think we have to agree with his methods, or maybe some hunters will understand that he's hunting and he needs it. but in some other way, he can take his boat and he can go to the supermarket and buy the meat that he wants, or he even could be a vegetarian and then respect nature in the proper way and, you know, take the berries and, you know, so that you could always sort of try to experiment with pushing the limits for how we should understand and what should be the right way of sort of treating the nature if you really sincerely respected it and understood it. So for me, I think I hope that the film will reflect on both sides, showing that it's not that simple.
Yeah.
It's really complex, and people in here, when they watched this film, because I had a local premiere here, and they were like super happy that this is the way we live, this is the way we have lived for so many years. Normal, like the normal people around here, they always used to, you know, poach animals, and they respected it, and they were doing fishing and, you know, like serving their table basically on their own. But reality is not like that anymore. I mean, people don't hunt in that sense anymore, because they go to the supermarket and they buy everything they need, and then they hunt on top of that to sort of, and so then everything becomes extremely complex, and you can't really tell what is right or what is wrong. But I think if we get to spend a little bit more time with nature and just hang out and understand that this complexity exists, and the beauty of these animals also exists, and the dynamic between the animals and the humans living on this earth is essential for us to understand something about ourselves and understand something about everything around us. I think this is the only sort of outcome that a film like this can have. And on the other hand, Gunda serves an extremely, at least for me personally, a very important message that if we spend time with someone and we get to know them, we can also start to love them and understand that they have a personality and all of these type of things. So, yeah. But if your question was if I care for animals, and
kind of know already that you do.
Yeah, maybe I do. I definitely do, and it's really hard for me to sort of cope with all of these things, because it's a huge question.
You said that you had the screening for people from the place. What was the reaction of our dear Steiner?
Yeah, he became very emotional, actually, also because he watched his dog die again, which was I think a very important friend for him. So he actually cried a lot during the film, which was a bit overwhelming for us, because we had rented the local cinema here, so it was basically just me, Steinar, and my producer and wife, who was there watching it, and it was very emotional because I never seen him cry. I didn't think he could cry, to be honest. But of course he can, but he is a very, you know, macho type of guy, so it was interesting. Yeah,
full of contradictions at the same time, because there are those emotions like hidden somewhere out there and you never show them. That would be another conversation to just like talk about masculinity on the screen in your film, but we would need another I guess 45 minutes for that to talk about this. And that's why I love this kind of documentary films, that there's not that much out there on the surface. I mean, like, there's not too much action, not too many words are said, it's in black and white, there's not too many sounds, and suddenly when you start to think about it and talk about it, all those things come and resurface again. Wow, that's a lot, and I hope the viewers of the film is going to discover even more things that are hidden there in the textures and in the black and white world of your film.
Thank you very much. I sincerely I hope to be back in Krakow in person at some point. So I will definitely work hard to make an even better film next time. And let's talk about masculinity then, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the first to. Oh, Egil is coming to Krakow. I'm gonna do the Q&A. We have still some topics to discover and to talk about from our last meeting, which was on Zoom. Yeah, I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed for that. And good luck with everything. And I hope that the weather is gonna be better. That there's gonna be a bit of sun in north.
Yeah, today is actually a bit sunnier, and yesterday was a snowstorm. So yeah, I think it's on the rise. So, yeah.
Okay, so good luck with everything and thank you for being with us. Drodzy Państwo, dziękuję bardzo za spotkanie z nami. Moim gościem był reżyser filmu Tam, gdzie wraca człowiek. Myślę, że my też do tego filmu będziemy mogli wracać, bo tutaj bardzo dużo tematów. Dziękuję jeszcze raz. Tusen tak.
Tusen tak. Thank you very much and see you around.